Get the meal and bath ready quickly, my husband said without even looking at me. His voice was cold, and he was focused on the TV. I had started getting used to his distant behavior, but every time I noticed it, I felt a wave of sadness and humiliation. Please wait a little. Let me finish breastfeeding first, I said softly. I was holding my 1-month-old baby and feeding her. I couldn't manage everything at once. Every day, I struggled to juggle housework and childcare. I was physically and mentally exhausted. Before I could say anything else, I felt a sharp pain in my stomach. I didn't understand what had happened, but my instincts kicked in, and I curled up to protect my baby. John had kicked me. In shock, I looked up to see him smirking down at me. Then, he raised his hand as if to hit me. Suddenly, a voice called John's name from behind. His face changed completely. My name is Mia. After graduating from college, I started working at the front office of my father's company. That's where I met John during a company event. He was a leader in the sales department, and I was drawn to his earnest attitude and kindness. We connected quickly, sharing similar interests and values. Our families, especially my father, supported our relationship wholeheartedly. My dad admired John's character and dedication to his work. With the blessings of our friends and family, we got married a year ago. I thought we were starting a life full of love and happiness. But after our marriage, John's behavior changed completely. After we got married, I left my job and became a full-time housewife. I enjoyed doing household chores and put my heart into everything. It was a new role for me as a newlywed, and I wanted to do my best. But about a month into our marriage, I noticed John changing. The taste of dinner is different today, isn't it? He said one evening. Why is the house so messy? Can you be more efficient since you're home all day? I was shocked. John had never spoken to me this way before, in it from the moment we met until our wedding day. His words were harsh and cold. I couldn't understand what had gone wrong. Was I the problem? Determined to make things better, I worked even harder on the house. I cleaned and cooked with extra care, hoping John would notice and appreciate my efforts. But no matter what I did, his criticisms only grew harsher. Feeling overwhelmed, I decided to meet a close friend from college for lunch. She worked near John's office and shared something surprising. During breaks at work, John brags about how he married the boss's daughter, she said. Hearing this for the first time, I felt uneasy. Was our marriage just a way for John to benefit from being the CEO's son-in-law? I couldn't shake the feeling of doubt and disappointment. What should have been a refreshing lunch left me feeling worse, and I headed home feeling more downcast than ever. That evening, John came home as usual. He sat on the couch, turned on the TV, and poured himself a glass of his favorite whiskey. As he sipped, he looked at me and said casually, "Well, it looks like you just stay at home without doing much." His words cut deep, leaving me hurt and questioning everything. "Maybe you should work outside," John said. "But don't neglect the housework. I want everything done perfectly." This surprised me. The reason I had quit my job in the first place was because John had asked me to focus on our family. I felt confused and unsure, but I didn't want to argue and create more tension, so I reluctantly agreed. I had loved my previous job as a receptionist, where I interacted with different people every day. I wasn't sure what kind of job I would look for now, but I thought working again could bring a positive change. Staying home and only doing housework wasn't enough for me. Since we got married, John's behavior had been making me feel constantly anxious. Every day, I felt drained emotionally and physically. A few days later, I started working as a cashier at a large grocery store nearby. Balancing my job and keeping up with the housework was tough, but it gave me a small escape from the endless chores. Being at work, even for a little while, felt refreshing. But John didn't change. He kept criticizing me, even belittling my new job. "The job you're doing doesn't really matter, does it?" he said. "You can only manage with that small income because I'm the one providing for us." His words hurt deeply. I felt completely exhausted, both mentally and physically. Around this time, I began feeling unwell and decided to see a doctor. The diagnosis surprised me was pregnant. I had mixed feelings. I was happy about the baby, but worried about raising a child while dealing with John's behavior. Deep down, I hoped that having a baby might soften John's attitude and bring some warmth back into our relationship. That night, I gathered the courage to tell John about the pregnancy. "Oh, I see. When's the due date?" he said, his voice cold and indifferent, nothing like the warmth I had hoped for. In the days that followed, John acted as if nothing had changed. He simply expected me to continue doing all the housework, as usual. I had always wanted children someday, but deep down, I felt uneasy about bringing a child into our shaky marriage. Still, I decided to tell my parents the news of my pregnancy. The next day, John and I visited my parents. When I shared the news, my father's face lit up with joy. "A grandchild is on the way," he said, smiling brightly as he came over to hug me. My mom was just as excited. "I wonder if it's a boy or a girl," she said, chatting happily with my dad. John stayed quiet, listening to the conversation with a polite smile. In front of my father, he always tried to make a good impression. He did this at work too, but when we were alone, his attitude toward me was cold and harsh. For a while, I had wanted to tell my parents about the difficulties in our marriage, but I hesitated because I didn't want to upset them, especially when they had been so happy for us. Lately, John's behavior had been unbearable, and I was seriously considering opening up to them. As I watched their loving smiles that day, I couldn't bring myself to say anything. After a while, my father asked my mother to bring something. He had a surprise planned for us, and soon, she returned holding a gift, brand new nanny cam. "This will let you check on your home, even when you're out," my dad said, smiling proudly. "I think it'll be really helpful for your new life." I was deeply touched by their thoughtfulness. As I imagined our future with the baby, I felt a flicker of hope and excitement. Looking at John, who was still smiling gently, I hoped he was also looking forward to the baby's arrival. But everything changed the moment we got home. John grabbed the camera from my hands and, without warning, slammed it onto the floor. "Why did you even bring this home?" he shouted. His anger exploded as he stomped on the camera over and over. "Stop," I screamed, horrified, but by then, the camera was completely destroyed. John turned to me and said coldly, "Clean this mess up, and tell them you dropped it and broke it." Then he shut himself in another room, leaving me stunned. The difference between how John acted around my parents and how he treated me at home was shocking. His outbursts made it clear that he didn't care about the baby or about creating a loving home. I stared at the shattered pieces of the gift my parents had given me with so much love. I couldn't believe this had just happened. Feeling overwhelmed, I sank to the floor and tried to steady my breathing. The happiness I had felt earlier vanished completely, replaced by fear, sadness, and doubt about the future. I often worried about whether my unborn child, who was growing and moving inside me, would be okay in such a stressful environment. I started questioning my decisions, especially my choice to marry John. But despite these doubts, my love for my child never wavered. I was determined to bring them into this world and give them all the love I had. As I wrestled with these emotions, tears would often come without warning. To avoid another argument with John, I shakily picked up my phone and told my parents about how things were going. A few months later, my beautiful daughter was born. After talking with my parents, we decided to name her Lily, a name my father seemed especially fond of. He even suggested John take paternity leave to help out. But those weeks were anything but peaceful for me. Being with John all day, from morning until night, felt suffocating. When my father visited us during his busy schedule, John would pretend to share the responsibilities of taking care of Lily in the house. As soon as my parents left, he went back to being cold and harsh. Even when I was exhausted from postpartum recovery and struggling with my health, John showed no understanding. He refused to help with anything, constantly blaming me instead. My body felt worn down as I juggled housework and caring for Lily, growing more tired every day. Whenever I asked John for support, he brushed me off with a cold, "Why should I have to do it?" My requests were always ignored, and his temper only made things worse. Sometimes, he'd storm out of the house in anger, and when he returned, he'd bark orders like, "Make dinner now," or "Get the bath ready," even while I was breastfeeding Lily. On one occasion, while I was feeding her, he pulled my hair forcefully and shouted, "Just wait, I'll do it as soon as I'm done feeding the baby." I pleaded, trying to calm him down, but every day felt like a battle. One particularly difficult night, Lily wouldn't stop crying. I was completely drained and just wanted her to fall asleep so I could get even a little rest. But no matter what I did, she kept crying. Instead of understanding, John added to the pressure. "She's so loud, can't you even put her to sleep properly?" he snapped. Meanwhile, in the living room center of our home, Jen Saturday comfortably, engrossed in the TV, as if nothing was wrong. John kept yelling at me, giving me orders to do housework with an angry look on his face. His loud voice only made Lily cry louder, and I felt completely hopeless. Why doesn't he understand how hard I'm trying? I thought as tears welled up in my eyes. As I looked at him in despair, I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my abdomen. Before I could process what was happening, I collapsed onto the floor, my body aching all over. The pain was unbearable, and I realized John had kicked me. He stood there, staring at me, almost as if he was enduring the sight of me in pain. Just as he moved closer, ready to strike again, a commanding voice shouted, "Stop it." John frowned, startled, and looked around the room, trying to figure out who had spoken. "I'm here. I saw everything you did." The voice was coming from near the bookshelf. John walked over, his face a mix of surprise and panic. Why are you here?" he stammered. A faint light was coming from a small gap in the bookshelf. It was the blinking light of a hidden surveillance camera. The display on the camera showed my father's angry, concerned face. After John had broken the first camera, I secretly asked my father to help me install a new one. I placed it carefully among the books on the shelf, in a spot John never touched, and adjusted it to capture the whole living room. My father had hoped to see Lily through the camera, but instead, he saw this horrifying scene. "I'm on my way. Wait for me," my father said firmly. Though his voice was calm, I could sense his deep anger. John stared at the camera in disbelief, his eyes wide, taking advantage of his shock. I quickly locked myself and Lily in the room, determined to protect us from him. John's face twisted with rage. He pounded on the door, shouting furiously, "What are you doing? Mia, you're my wife. You should obey me. Open the door now." I yelled back, "That's such an outdated way of thinking. I won't let you control me anymore." His anger only grew. "How dare you talk back to me? If you won't come out, I'll force you out," he screamed, his fist slamming against the door. I had never seen him so terrifying before. Then, a calm but powerful voice broke through the chaos. "That's enough. Is this how you plan to behave?" To my relief, my father stood behind John, holding the spare key I had given him for emergencies. His steady, confident presence filled the room, and I felt a surge of hope that everything would finally be okay. John was so focused on breaking down the door that he didn't realize my father had quietly entered the house. "I've seen everything that happened here," my father said firmly. "I have never been this angry in my life. The way you've treated my precious daughter and frightened my grandchild is unforgivable." John's face turned pale, and he began to tremble in fear. "The company you work for belongs to a friend of mine," my father continued. "Don't ever show your face there again, and don't come near my daughter, my grandchild, or me ever again." With those harsh words, my father called for help, and John was escorted out of the house. Shortly afterward, my mother, Lily, and I rushed to the hospital. The doctor confirmed I had no serious injuries, but advised plenty of rest due to the mental trauma. With my father's help, a few days later, I received the news that my divorce from John was officially finalized. The evidence of John's past actions, including the footage from the surveillance camera I had set up, played a crucial role. I was also granted proper compensation. Looking for a fresh start, Lily and I moved in with my parents for the time being. They were deeply worried about me and asked why I hadn't told them sooner or sought help when they were willing to support me. A few days later, to my surprise, John showed up unexpectedly. He had managed to find a new job but was already in trouble again. He had broken a marriage promise to another woman and dishonestly taken money from her. Now, the woman was demanding her money back along with compensation. John admitted the woman had a strong and intimidating personality, and he was genuinely scared of her. She was even pressuring him to marry her if he couldn't repay her. Desperate, John asked me for financial help. I stayed calm and told him that his problems were his responsibility, not mine. After the divorce, I returned to my old job and threw myself into my work. Seeing how much I had grown and changed, John began trying to win me back. "You look so beautiful now," he said one day, trying to charm me. Unmoved by his words, I excused myself, saying I needed to use the restroom. In truth, I made a quick call to set a plan in motion. Just as John tried to continue our conversation, an unexpected woman suddenly appeared. "Why are you here?" John's face showed complete shock. The woman standing before him was someone John had previously tried to scam by pretending to promise marriage. After divorcing John, I grew curious about what he was up to and asked for my father's help to keep an eye on his actions. I discovered he was involved in shady dealings again, targeting this woman as his next victim. I even gathered information about her and their interactions. John couldn't understand what was happening and left the scene with the woman, looking completely stunned. Later, John started showing up at my workplace, always coming up with excuses to see me. However, the only person who agreed to meet with him was the CEO, my father. After my father warned John about possible legal action, his visits became far less frequent. According to my father, John is now trying to raise money to pay off his debts and compensate others. He's seeking help from his family and friends while living very frugally and working hard every day. Meanwhile, my life has taken a positive turn. My work is going well, and I've been given more opportunities to take on new projects. Time with Lily has become even more precious to me, and I cherish our moments together. On especially busy days, my parents help take care of her, allowing me to balance both my career and family life. With their support, I'm able to focus on being a loving and dependable mother, while also working hard to achieve more success in my job.